Welcome to my new 2022 Senate prediction. And let's get started with the safe states. And there we go. Lastly, we can't forget about Iowa. The only state that could drop if Chuck Grassley retires, but even then, it's probably going to be like 14, 15. And it depends on the candidate, but still, Chuck Grassley's probably going to run again, which is why I'm going to keep it as a safe state. So this brings the solid state baseline for both parties to 44 Republicans against 45 Democrats. Okay, now getting more interesting. Let's talk about Colorado. So for Colorado, we all know that Michael Bennet will probably run for re-election. So we can just skip that and go to the Republican primary. And there's not that many people, to be honest with you, that are like noteworthy. The only one could be is Cory Gardner, former senator, as many of you know. But apart from that, there's not someone that could make me change my mind yet. Which is why I do think that no matter what happens, Colorado's probably going to be a likely state. Okay, moving on to another state. So I'm going to start with Ohio now. So for this state, we all know that Rob Portman will not seek re-election in 2022 due to various reasons. And let's go to the Republican primaries. So there's a couple of them. We have, first off, Josh Mandel, who is a pretty big politician in Ohio, former state treasurer back in 2019, and a former nominee to the U.S. Senate. The other one is, I would say, Jane Timken, who was the former chair of the Ohio Republican Party not so long ago. And I think the last one would be someone like J.D. Vance. But apart from that, not much. And I'm going to move. There's a lot, so if you want to see here, and the endorsements right here. And as I was saying, I'm going to move on to the Democrats, which are, there's not that many candidates, but let's go. So, Jerry Springer. I'm going to go to Tim Ryan before I get distracted. So, Tim Ryan, pretty big Democrat here, former representative of the Ohio 13th district, and also ran in 2020 for the presidential nominee for Democrats. But to be honest, apart from that, there's not that much he can do. But this state is so Republican, it's probably going to be a likely margin for this race. Worst case scenario, lean if the GOP nominates someone really bad. But the most likely scenario is something like 14%, which is why I'm going to leave it like this. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next state, that being Florida. So we all know that Marco Rubio is almost no doubt going to run again. So we don't have to look at the Republican primary. Let's go to the Democratic primary. So there's a couple of big ones, not that many, but the main one that does kind of stand out is Val Demings, who in the 2020 race, Joe Biden did consider her as being the potential VP pick about one with Harris. Even if Val Demings runs, this state is really Republican. I do expect Marco Rubio to easily win here once again in his re-election bid in 2022. No matter who the candidate is for the Democrats. Now moving on to the next one. So for Alaska and Lisa Murkowski, she's going to try to run for re-election once again, even though Donald Trump will try to primary her since she voted for impeachment. And this is why we gotta look at the Republican Party primary. There's a couple ones, no big ones. We have Laura Ingraham from Fox News. We have Sarah Palin, possibly. Not the greatest candidate, but still. We have Mike Dunleavy, former governor of Alaska. And lastly, we have Joe Miller. For Democrats, there's not many. The only one is Al Gross, who ran in 2020, but still lost. And I believe that due to the voting system and everything, even if Trump tries his best to primary her, the ranking voting system is going to favor Lisa Murkowski quite a lot. So she's probably going to win unless something big happens to her career. And this is it for the likely and the safe states for each party, which puts the Republicans at 47 against the Democrats 46. And let me start with the first lean state. I'm going to talk about New Hampshire. As many of you know, Maggie Hassan will try to run for re-election, but this is going to be a bit of a tricky race to follow and predict. Now let's go to the Republican primary. So this is where things get really interesting in this race since Chris Sununu. We all know Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, has been there since 2017. His family is a political dynasty in New Hampshire. His father, if I'm not mistaken, was also governor of New Hampshire in the 80s. His brother was also a politician from here. And this is why New Hampshire is going to be tricky to follow. But at the moment, I do think Chris Sununu, if he decides to run, he will say his decision in the summer. He's the only one here that can beat a Democrat in New Hampshire. And I do think that he will win, not by a likely margin. I don't think that it would be possible for him. At the moment, I do think lean margin is probably the best category, even though this could easily move either way. But I do see Chris Sununu being a really good candidate for the GOP. Moving on, I'm going to talk about North Carolina. So as many of you know, Trump has just endorsed Ted Budd a couple days ago, which has turned this race upside down for the primary. And let's briefly look to the Republican primaries. So The main one was Pat McCrory, since he was the former governor of North Carolina. There were other ones notable, like maybe like Mark Walker and Ted Budd, who got the endorsement. And this was an open seat since Richard Burr decided to retire. And yeah, for Democrats, let's look at them. Here's the endorsements you want to look at. So this is before the endorsement. Yeah, Pat McCrory was like leading by a lot. I don't usually look at posters, only for like primaries and small stuff. But you're gonna see a lot of these Pat McCrory votes, and Walker and the undecided will go to Ted Budd in the future. While for Democrats, not that many big ones, to be honest. The only one maybe is like Cherry Beasley, if that's how you say it. But apart from that, there's no candidates that would make me think this race would be more competitive in the future or in 2022, which is why I do think Republicans will win here by a lean margin of around like 2 to 4% in my opinion. Okay, now for Arizona and for Mark Kelly's seat. He was elected in the 2020 special election, as many of you know, meaning that he has to run again in 2022. And let's go to the Republican primary. And there's not too many big ones. The two big ones for the GOP are the Andy Biggs and Mark Brnovich. I do think that both of these names or people will not be able to win in 2022. And Kelly is a really good candidate for the Democrats, which is why I do think that as long as he stays in the center, in the middle, he will win his re-election bid in 2022. Either by a lean, but most likely just a tilt margin. And as I've said before, as long as he doesn't go too much to the left on certain issues like guns and immigration, he should do good though. And now let me talk about Nevada. And this being incumbent Democrat Cortez Masto. And in most elections, this would not be thought about being like a purple state, even in like a red wave. But there's many reasons why this could drop, and let's look to the Republican primary. So we have the two big ones are Adam Laxalt, I think that's how you say his name, Attorney General, and yeah, while for the decline one is Brian Sandoval. As many of you know, I have talked about him quite a lot. He was the former governor of Nevada, pretty good name. He was the must-have nominee for Republicans, but he has declined over and over again, which is why I doubt he's gonna run, because of that, of course. And in my opinion, he's the only one that can win here for the GOP. Even with everything that the DSA could do in the future that could alienate centrist voters, I do think it's not going to be a likely state. You could make a decent case. It could be like a lean margin, but because how volatile this is, the most appropriate prediction would be as a tilt state. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 6 months, but I do think that Cortez Masto, with being an incumbent and everything, even if the DSA really messes things up, and there's like a mild red wave or something like that, I do think she can just win here. Because it's Nevada, and as long that it's not Brian Sandoval who's on the other side, she can win here. Okay, I'm gonna talk about Wisconsin. So this is another interesting state. So Ron Johnson, as many of you know, he has flip-flopped so many times on whether to or not to run in 2022. He was just barely elected in 2016, and in 2022, it's also going to be a really close race. We all know that Republican primary will be him. It really matters who will be the Democratic nominee. And as you can see, there's not a lot of big names that come to mind, like Chris Larson here or Tom Nelson, but not someone that would make me go, wow, this is going to be a purple state for sure. And because 2022 is probably going to be it's probably not going to be like a 2010 nor a 2014. Most likely it's going to be like a mild red wave and everything. The GOP will just, once again, win here by a tilt margin. But to be honest, all these races could really depend on a whole lot, and especially on what Donald Trump decides to do. If he does rallies, he could easily shake up a couple of these races for the good or the bad. But still, I think this is going to be a really good prediction. So let me move on to the next state. I'm going to talk about Pennsylvania, so let's go. This is going to be one of the most heated races of all the 2022 election year, since, as many of you know, Pat Toomey will retire, meaning that both the Republicans will have a primary and the Democrats. And there's a lot of candidates, as you can see, like Sean Parnell, for example, being one of them. And there's also people like Everett Stern. But there's so many people, there's so many, and endorsements as well. I have to use this, so if you want to pause, go ahead, but I'm going to go to the Democratic primary. Well, for the Democrats, there's also more candidates, but the main one is, of course, going to be John Fetterman, a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, mayor as well before. It's probably going to be the main one for the Democrats. They're probably going to put a lot of money into his campaign. And if I had to guess out of both parties who would be the most likely nominee for their own party, I would say John Fetterman. There's also people like Connor Lamb, for example, another good pick. possibly, that could also be the nominee for the Democrats. But at the end of the day, politics, it's really hard to know who will be the nominee. Things can change easily from one day to the other. Democrats will just barely win here by a tilt margin due to the money they're gonna put here and due to the media attention. And lastly, before I go to Georgia, I'm gonna give a quick shout out to American Predictions. Really good channel. You should definitely check him out. He does predictions and even election nights as seen here. I enjoy all of his videos. Check him out and subscribe. Link down in the description. Now back to Georgia. This is a really difficult call to make, with 2022 probably favoring the GOP, and I do believe there's going to be a slightly lower turnout due to it being a midterm, of course. Plus, Biden's agenda not satisfying a lot of progressives because of the 50-50 Senate. And also, you gotta bear in mind that Trump rallies could go either really well or the opposite way as well. And lastly, the Georgia bill is, you also have to consider this in 2022. I strongly believe that 2022 will likely not be like a 2010 or a 2014 for Republicans because of things like the 6th of January. But still, I do think it will be a slightly mild red wave. And it will come down 100% to who the GOP nominates. If they nominate someone like Herschel Walker, I do think he will be the best strategic move politically speaking, due to his being a former professional footballer, and his race would really help out the GOP here. This is a true coin toss that could go either way, but at the moment I do give it to the GOP, as long as it doesn't go into runoffs, and if they pick the good nominee for them. If not, if they pick someone else or goes to the runoffs or something like that, it could go to like 50 states for each party. Or I should say 50 seats. But at the moment, I do have it as 51 for the GOP and 49 for the Democrats. Please like and subscribe and share with your friends and family. This is Politics Made Simple here, and this was my 2022 Senate prediction updated. Thank you for watching. Bye.